All right. And we will begin in five, four, three. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. I hope you are had a great week as you are listening to this, as you head into your Labor Day weekend. Joining me today is my co-host, Micah Current. How are you doing today, Micah?
I'm good, Scott, but how in the world is it Labor Day already?
I don't know.
I
I
felt
saw
like the summer absolutely flew. I've mentioned that I've worked at Miami University and I still do, but classes started last Monday and we were having a staff meeting and I said something. I feel like we were literally sitting at our commencement ceremony in May, like yesterday. It
Mhm.
just felt like the whole summer flew, and I was like,
Yeah.
it's like a blur. I'm like, what happened and why did they go so fast?
Yeah,
So
I'm with you. I don't know how everything went so quickly as it did. Like, yeah, there's a part during July. I went on vacation. I had my summer class, had my in-person summer class, and I'm thinking, wow, we're already in fall already. What happened? Like, we're summer, and of course I was moving too, so there was a lot going on over the
I saw
summer.
Christmas stuff somewhere over the weekend at some store. I couldn't tell you what store it was, but there was Christmas stuff out already.
I went to the grocery store and I saw like they were selling jack-o'-lantern pumpkins, like big gigantic pumpkins. I'm like, if you buy one of those, by the time you get to the point where you cut into it and carve it, it's gonna
Right.
be rotted. So why are you? And you can't really use it to make like pies because it's not a, you know, pie pumpkins are smaller because it has more flavor to them. So getting a big jack o' lantern's not going to do anything unless you're someone who just likes pumpkin seeds and you're just cutting it up just so you could get its guts to make roasted pumpkin seeds, which I do love pumpkin seeds. I'll
I
eat that.
saw over the weekend at Menards
Mm-hmm.
um, a 12-foot like Grim Reaper, and it was
Hmm.
like up on this display, and you press the button and it says and it tries to scare you and stuff. But it was huge. It was $300, but it was 12 foot tall. It was crazy.
Man.
They got all kinds of
Oh,
Halloween decorations at Menards, but I saw Christmas decorations somewhere or
yeah.
Christmas for
Jeez.
sale somewhere.
Yeah, crazy, crazy, crazy. And speaking of crazy, what's the weirdest thing that happened to you this past week, Micah?
Well, before we started recording, you said that you have one, and then I was reminded about, I don't know, crazy or if it was just just a strange happenstance. But
Yeah.
yesterday I was leading worship at my church, and I usually lead from the guitar, but the pastor who was speaking asked me to lead the response song at the end from the piano, and I said that's fine, I can do that as well. And we started. We had a great worship service. It was really anointed, and I felt like the Holy Spirit really showed up. And then the pastor spoke. She called me up to do the response song, and so uh, I don't know. Are you familiar with perfect pitch and relative perfect pitch and things like that?
Hmm.
So like I have a really, really good ear, right? I can play by ear. I can play, I can read music. I'm professionally trained. I went to school for music and have been playing music since I was 4 years old. And so the guy that plays piano, he has some experience, but not a lot. And so I'm learning that he has to have songs in different keys from what I'm playing them in, or like the music that he has needs to be printed out in different keys so he can transpose it and read it in an easier key so that he can play along with the rest of the worship team. And one of the
Hmm.
ways that he does that is by hitting the transpose button on the keyboard, moving the half step, whole step, like up, down, down a half step and everything. So
Yeah.
we did our worship set at the beginning of the service, and we got to the song right before the prayer, right before the message, and it
Hmm.
was like the key of E or something like that. And so he had to transpose it down to C so that he could play it in the key that we were playing it in and feel more comfortable.
Hmm.
So I get up to go do the response song at the end, and I'm playing the intro chords of the song, and I go to try to sing the first note, and I'm like, this is not right. I ended up, I'm like, I play the intro again, and I eventually find the note, but like I'm like, this is not the right key, and I'm playing the right key on the keyboard. But in the moment, I'm not thinking that, hey, this guy, didn't change the button back to where it was originally, so it wasn't in the key that I. But my ear was telling me this is wrong. This is not the right key. This is not the right key. I'm supposed to be playing it in. So anyway, he comes up to me after service. He's like, You looked a little lost during that response time. And I was like, what do you mean? He was like, that's the wrong key. And I was like, yeah, I know it was the wrong key. And apparently he forgot to press the button. So like I made it work in the moment, but like I don't know if that's super confusing for you or your
No,
listeners. I'm a
I
big time nerd and I'm a big time music nerd on top of being a nerd. And it was like this is not right. And my wife's like, there was something wrong, wasn't there? And it's like,
there's
yeah,
something wrong.
it was something terribly wrong. So like if you play something like I mean, if you put a capo on a guitar or you want to sing a
Hmm.
song with a key that's way too high for your vocal range, it's not going to work. And so it was almost completely out of my range. And thankfully I made it work. But it was like, man, I'm playing this intro and nothing's coming out because I'm like, I knew it was wrong. My subconscious was telling me this is not the right key. And I didn't know how to transpose the key back to the thing on the keyboard itself because I'd only played that
Hmm.
keyboard twice. So anyway, that was super weird. It was super random, but we made it work. God was glorified, and even though it was weird, uh, God be praised. So
So,
Scott,
yeah.
what happened? What happened to you?
Well,
Weird.
before I jump into that, how did you feel with your second day leading than your first day? Felt better?
I mean, I felt a little bit more comfortable,
Okay.
a little bit more, I guess, at ease.
All right.
It was kind of a weird rehearsal. We can get into that in another topic, I guess. But
Yeah,
like,
no, that's fine.
well, I'm used to more of a production driven service worship
Yeah.
experience where I'm using click tracks and loops and stems, and they don't use that there, and in-ear monitors, and they don't use that stuff at this church. And so,
Mhm.
the drummer and I are kind of like, I'm like, this song's too fast. You're playing it too fast. I'm used to playing it slower. He's like, I'll follow you. And we had to do the first song a couple of times. And so, but once we got through that, it was fine. And we introduced a new song yesterday and everybody seemed to like it. But yeah, the pastor was back and things seemed to go really well during the service. So,
All right.
what about the weirdest thing that happened to you? And I guess how was your second Sunday, or is this your third?
So this is technically it's my third
Second
Sunday.
official, third Sunday.
It's second Sunday officially because my first Sunday was just show up. No, I mean it was good. There's a lot of new people I keep seeing. I think there's a lot of people who are slowly coming back to church. Kind of the whole summer thing because there's some schools that are still kind of in the process of still starting up. So a lot of people, family vacations, still kind of getting their last minute outings out before everything kind of gets back to the normalcy of the school schedule and how that flows into church events and everything else. No, but the weirdest thing is I have a Ford Edge and it's been making a lot of weird noises. So my wife keeps saying, "Hey, get it in the shop." So we move here, and like with anything else, when you move to a new location, you have to figure out, okay, find a new doctor, find new eye doctors, dentist. So it's like, okay, let's find a new mechanic. So I'm looking
This isn't
around
your
at
new car, is it?
what?
This isn't your new car, is it?
No, 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 no. This is our older one, our
So your
older
wife
one.
left you with the old car, and you gave her the new one.
Well, here's the thing. She wanted to take the old car because you could store more stuff in there because it's a hatchback, so you can bring more stuff back. Because she'll be back next weekend or Labor Day weekend. She'll be back. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So I set up an appointment for Thursday at 9 o'clock. All right. I drive, I get to this one building. They're saying you're at the wrong spot. You got to go over to the other side of the building. I'm like, okay. I go over to the other side of the building. I see where I'm supposed to go. And it's like this one little like tunnel that you have to drive through. Well, the guy who was in front of me, apparently he couldn't drop his car off. So in order for him to get out, I had to back up so he could back up and get out and go. So then I come in, the lady goes, "Yeah, what's your name?" I go, "Stedman, I have an appointment at 9 o'clock." And she sees it's a Ford Edge and she goes, "Oh, and what year is your Ford Edge?" It's like I told them this already on the phone. I go, "It's a 2009 Ford Edge." "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. We don't work on anything older than 2015. So I'm like, "Wait, what? That's weird." So they're telling me, so then there's like a big, here in kind of on the east side, there's this big like auto mart called Reichert's Auto Mart. So they have a Ford thing. So I go and drive it there, and I pull in, and the guy goes, "So do you have an appointment?" I go, uh, "No, I went took it somewhere else, and they told me they couldn't work on it." So he went and he talked to his manager. Supervisor came out, talked to me. I told him the story. He goes, "Oh, you were," and he said the name of the place. "You went there, didn't you?" I'm like, "Yeah, it was closer to where we lived." He goes, "Yeah, that's the only place. That's the only Ford dealership I know that does that to people." Says, "Sorry, we're not going to work on anything older than a certain amount of years." So they were able to get it in and try to get it fixed, which I got a call tell me what was wrong with it. So they're going to work on it, and hopefully I'll get it back tonight. But then one guy was saying, "Oh yeah, that place is such a joke, like blah blah blah." I'm like, "You should give our business to us." But then he tells this story, and I literally, this is the craziest story I ever heard. There was a customer that had their car at this dealership that I wasn't allowed to go to. And the problem was, is anytime when the guy would slam on his brakes, the shell of his car would slide. So it would just slide. So he takes it into this place, and they were looking at it for 4 months, could not figure out what the issue was. So I guess the upper echelon of Ford said, "Okay, send it to this other place because you guys can't figure out what's wrong." Sent it to them, to Reichert's. They look at it. They found out, they figured it out in 4 hours what the problem was. They just didn't tighten the bolts down on the bottom that keeps the car, the top of the car, to the bottom of the car. 4 months, couldn't figure it out. The other place figures out in 4 hours. So I'm like, well, I'm glad I dodged a bullet and they didn't take my car in. It'd be there for like 3 years just to find out that there was a leak in the power steering fluid pump. So,
What are you supposed to do? Like, well, you know, your car's a 2009, and you go to the shop. They're like, we don't work on anything older than this year. And I'm like, well, you're just supposed to drive it until it dies and not drive it anymore.
well, yeah, but then here's the thing. It wasn't like it was a big mechanic. I mean, it was just a hose. They just
Yeah.
have to replace the hose. Like
But
every
like, you know what I'm saying though? Like, like, are you just supposed to, like, their mantra is like, we won't work on anything older than this? Like, I'm sure you could find somebody to work on it, or if you have a friend who's a mechanic or really does
but
that kind of stuff. But
here's
like, that's crazy that they wouldn't work on it.
but here's the thing, like where this thing is at, it's kind of in like a very like low income area. So
Yeah.
they're probably not getting a lot of cars that are 2015 and newer there.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're kind of already shooting yourself in the foot with business if you can't work on anything. Like that's I've never heard that before in my life. So that's my weird story. Like I didn't know people did that. So getting to our topic at hand, Micah sent me an email. There was an article in the Christian Post, and it focuses on the band Kutless. And if you are not familiar with the band Kutless, they were kind of like a rock Christian rock band in the late 90s, early 2000s. Really did a lot of like, I would say kind of more like rock worship, I would say. Like they were, a lot of their music was very worshipful, not like kind of like with Christian rock where it's like, yeah, we'll sing uplifting songs. Maybe we'll mention Jesus, but we're kind of more heavy. They were all about kind of the praise and worship aspect, but kind of had more of a grittier instrumental style, like a more hard rock style. And it was just kind of talking about their career, kind of some of the challenges that they went through just by, you know, playing and people not understanding their music, to seeing other people in the music industry kind of renounce their faith from that. So it's a very good article to read. So Michael, what were your initial impressions about the article?
Um, you know, that was ding dong. Even though I have my phone on do not disturb, I still got that. That's kind of nuts. Sorry about that.
That's
My
okay.
initial read, you know, for one, I didn't listen to Cutlass very much growing up. I was familiar with them, but like I
Hmm.
was more like I don't know, like a hiatus, I guess, of music, like Christian music. Like listened to it a lot in the early to late '90s, and then early 2000s. I kind of took a break, and then I didn't get really back into it until probably 2011, 2012, and I was really into more so with the
Hmm.
Hillsong United, Young and Free. But like in the '90s and stuff, I was a big fan of like DC Talk, and I was a big fan of some other bands. But like Cutlass really broke through in the late '90s, early 2000s. If I understand it correctly from the
Hmm.
article. But the one of the things that really struck a chord with me was the fact that they they would be going to different places to play live music, and people would be outside picketing their music,
Mm-hmm.
not because they were anti-Christian, but because they were Christians. And they were like, you shouldn't be playing this loud rock music, and it's not Christian, and it's not Jesus. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Right. And we've had this conversation in other episodes, but like, it's, even then it was 2000, 2001. It's like, why are we having these conversations in 2000, 2001 when some of these hymns are, over 100 years old? And we're still having that same worship war conversation versus traditional versus contemporary versus blended versus this is what we're going to do, this is what we're not going to do. So anyway, the two things I really took was the fact that people were like picketing outside of their concerts, and they were Christians. They were like having a problem with the music or the style of the music they were playing. And then also uh, in the second half of the article, it talks about being more, the church needs to be a more, what do they say, safe place, more a place
Mm-hmm.
of grace, more a place of healing, and more of a place of hope. And um, I'm pulling it up as we talk. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you're exactly.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
The church needs to be, um, where is it? This is a longer article I sent you to.
Yeah, it says they stress, but the church, they stress, needs to do a better job at being a safe place to process doubt and come alongside those struggling. Historically, Mead said the church has got it wrong, and he emphasized, a lot of things that are pretty damaging about church culture. There are significant issues that do need to be addressed. Um, and that's kind of right after they
Here it
talked
is.
about Marty
It's
Sampson and Hawk Nelson, or the lead singer of Hawk Nelson, renouncing their faith.
the word I was thinking of. The church needs to do a better job of being a safe place,
Yeah.
and a place to process, your own faith. And we've used the scripture a lot on the podcast since I've been recording with you. But it says to work out your own salvation in a fear and trembling. And Paul talks about that in his letters. And I would agree wholeheartedly with that. In 2022, we need to be a better, place of healing and restoration, reconciliation. And it drives me nuts that we just go through the norm.
Mm-hmm.
Continue to go through the norm. Um,
Yeah.
I was, a great example of that is yesterday I was leading worship at this church, and we did the first song, and the second song, pastor came up and did the announcements or whatever and prayed. And then like I went to do another song, and I didn't even sing half. I wasn't even halfway through the verse of the song. The altar, we didn't say anything about the altars being open or anything, but people just started coming up and just started praying. And it was just like a move, right? The Holy
Mm-hmm.
Spirit move, and it was a good thing. But like, I think um in my prayer yesterday, right before the message, I just kept saying, God, we just need to sit in your presence, and we need to sit at your feet, and we need to sit before the throne of God, and just soak that in. And
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with what they said.
Yeah.
First needs to do a better job of being a safe place. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the stuff you thought was interesting, I thought was interesting too. From especially having people pick it there. We you could tell things are going in a wrong direction when Marilyn Manson came out with Antichrist Superstar, and Christians are picketing outside of arenas and stuff for their shows, and now they're picketing outside of Kutless shows because they don't agree with the style of music. Like, and that's the thing. It wasn't necessarily that the music was Christian. It was just it was edgier. It was harder. And again, I can remember being on staff at Marengo, and I think we've played Strong Tower as a worship set.
Well,
So
it's funny because Cutlass is like, if you look at Christian bands today,
mhm.
like some of them play the harder rock music than even Cutlass does,
Yeah.
right? Like Cutlass was like, I think it was um revolutionary for its time and history.
Hmm.
However, like they were like, is it Five Finger Death Punch? They're a
Yeah.
lot harder than, and even Skillet. I would say
Yeah.
Skillet been harder than Cutlass.
But Skillets went through so many musical
Genres and changes.
genres and changes over their history. But I think the thing that was fascinating, because they talked about how they got a signed deal with Tooth and Nail Records, which I'm a big Tooth and Nail kid. Like, I've listened to their entire catalog, love many of the bands, still do. Like any new music that comes from them, I'm listening to it. And I can remember just from that how much things were changing, because you had Tooth and Nail, which is more of your hardcore punk rock music, and then some indie stuff. And then they split and created Solid State, which was more for their metal division. And then they created BEC Recordings, which was going to be kind of like more of their louder, rougher music, but then kind of more focused on CCM thing. So that's why, Supertone's first album, The Adventures of the OC Supertones, was on Tooth and Nail, and it went to BEC. And then, long story short, apparently the founder of Tooth and Nail went out to Cornerstone years ago and didn't have anywhere to stay, and he actually stayed with Jeremy Camp's family. So he knew Jeremy Camp. So Jeremy Camp's first record deal was actually with Brandon Ebel at Tooth and Nail Records on the BEC division. And then that kind of paved the way for Kutless to come in too. And then even some other people I know from Anderson actually got onto not only BEC, but now they have a new division called Gospel Songs. That's part of that same umbrella. But it's just so fascinating, in the height of people arguing about contemporary and traditional music. And now you have this kind of harder, I would say more modern, more modern music, where it's a little bit edgier. It sounds almost like something you'd listen to a secular rock station, but they sing about Jesus, and people are having fits about it at that time. And now I think, if Kutless was to come on the thing today with bands like Skillet, I don't think there'd be a lot of people protesting music, but I'm sure there's probably some people who probably don't like how Skillet does go on tour with non-Christian bands.
Yeah.
And stuff. But then there's one part, and I mean, there's one of the questions I kind of wrote out was, and there was something in here where it was very brief, and I need to see if I can find it, but they're talking about this idea that, they had to, they kind of went on a hiatus, and it was just a time of, a real difficult ordeal that encompassed personal loss and financial repercussions for the group. And it said, we really need to take a break and heal and cry and learn how to trust people again. And they didn't really get down to the nitty gritty of what they meant by that. As far as, was it stuff that they had to deal with within the church climate, or was it something that had to deal with being in the CCM climate? Because there's been a couple podcasts I've listened to where Christian artists talk about kind of the ugly side of CCM music or worship music. And I think that's something that we have to, I guess that's something I would like to know more about. Like what was kind of the thing that caused them to go on a hiatus, that they had to really take that moment to heal from all that they've experienced in their almost 20-year career.
Yeah, like, do you think it's more of a personal reason for the band and they needed a break, or do you think it was because of the pressure of the deconstructing and being criticized for the music they were putting out, or a combination of both? Or I have no idea.
It might be, and I think, I mean, if we go 5 years, and if this article came out, and if you go back 5 years, that's going to put us at about
2017, 2018.
That 2017, 2018. And I don't know, like I feel like it probably was church stuff, it probably was music stuff, and I'm sure just kind of the climate in our world too, political climate. I feel like, I always hear the thing that, Luther hatched the egg that Erasmus laid. And I feel like almost like Trump hatched the egg that Obama laid, or something like that, just as far as just how politically turmoil that we've had within our. And I want to know if that had to play into a lot of stuff, because a lot of bands who talk about that time period, around that same time period, they say, that was like a turning point for their band, or a turning point for people with their churches and everything else. So I don't know. Like it's just more speculation at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that it could be a variety of things, and uh, you know, so many bands. Like I've been in bands, in different genres of music and playing, and we've had different iterations of the band and different people that have played, and different people needed a break. And my friend Todd he's been on Nerd Talk with Jordan a couple of times, but Todd's the original drummer for Reliant K.
Mm-hmm.
And he, I think he wrote their first record with them, but he never went on tour with them because he got married and had kids. And so, but like Todd told me, he's still friends with those guys from Reliant K, but they're like on their fifth drummer. So they've been
Yeah.
around for 20 years and they're on their fifth drummer. So like, but back to the conversation at hand, like I can't imagine the pressure of the criticism for trying to do something different, trying to reach other people for Jesus that may not know uh, no church, and they're not the traditional church goer. They're not the traditional Christ follower. Are you familiar with what's the festival every year? Winter Jam. Are you familiar
Winter
with?
Jam.
Yeah, so they have like 20 bands that play. It's like a 6-hour festival, and Cutlass has been on it. Skillet's been on it. The Newsboys,
Mm-hmm.
various groups, and you know, I've been to it several times, and US Bank Arena, which is now Heritage Bank Center in Cincinnati, holds probably I would say 15 to 20,000 people, and they pack that place out, and they're like, hey, if you've never accepted Jesus, we would love to invite you to to accept Jesus, and
Mm-hmm.
come to Christ in that moment as a result of the music that's being played. They may have never heard of Cutlass, or they may have never heard of Skillet. They may have never,
Mm-hmm.
but that music and their style of music and the type of music that they play and the genre may resonate with them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing about music that I think that a lot of people seem to miss is that, as much as, the older generations are so good at pushing, traditional, we got to sing the hymns, we got to sing that. But if you have someone who's never set foot in a church,
Yeah,
who the only music that they have been exposed to has been hip hop, rock, more poppy, upbeat, modern poppy music, and you walk into someone and it's like, you know, key like piano, organs, very slow tempo. You have to turn the page, turn to hymnal number 547, and that may not necessarily be the page number. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, well, it becomes like an invisible barrier. And I think eventually, when they start coming, so when they start getting things, doing a Amazing Grace or doing a you know, Mighty Fortresses Are God or something like that, like you can really bring people to those, to that side and understand the scriptural or the theological truths in some of them. But you have to be able to build that bridge. So when you are fighting and saying, well, this isn't real music or this isn't good godly music, and that's the thing that I like about Cutlass is that they were convicted by that.
yeah,
Like they felt like as a band, as a vision, as a mission, it's like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to use our style of music that we like, and we're going to write music that's going to help give honor and glory to praise to God and to help people to help seek him. And if other followers are like poo-pooing on it, then that's very shameful to me, because it's like all you're doing is not only criticizing another band's work of trying to be gospel centric in their mission, but you're kind of creating a stumbling block for the band, but then you're also creating stumbling block for people who do like it. And then you're being told by, someone from church or the pastor that, oh, well, that's not real Christian music, or actually that's evil music. Because there's been times where I've had people at church tell me that the music I was listening to, like, how do you know it's Christian? People could be posing as Christians and like giving you satanic messages. I'm like, here's what the lyrics say: Jesus Christ crucified. Like,
right.
what? I mean, is that satanic? Because if it's satanic, they probably wouldn't be using the name Jesus Christ or talking about his crucifixion in a song if it's a satanic band.
Well, and something I know, like on the flip side of that, we talk about worship, like the quote unquote worship wars.
Yeah.
Something I watch a lot of live streams on Sundays to try to get ideas, try to get inspiration. And I really like Bethel worship, and I've said that before on this show. But something that I've noticed that Bethel has been doing in the last couple of months is they're doing throwbacks to like early 2000s worship songs, and they're making them their own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, man, these are so cool. And it's like, man, I love that song 20 years ago. I'm like, why are we doing a song that's 20 years old? But they're making it their own. And like, if you notice culture, within fashion and different things like that are kind of shifting back towards what the 90s were. If you've noticed that, I don't know if you've noticed
Mm-hmm.
that. But like kids are wearing fanny packs, kids are wearing high-waisted jeans, kids, their hair's, I work at a college, so I see these things all day long every day. And it's like, it's like it's 1996 again. And all we need is a starter jacket, right? The pullover. Uh, but kids will never know. But all that to say, like they're doing throwbacks,
Mm-hmm.
right? Doing throwbacks and making them like they're the 90s again. And like Bethel did Everlasting God yesterday. You know how old Everlasting
Mm-hmm.
God is? It came out in 2006.
Yeah.
It was released in 2006. And so like, you know, it's interesting that like culture is kind of shifting us backwards in a
Mm-hmm.
sense. Revisit some of those old songs, old worship songs, but like in reference to Cutlass and Skillet, and like those, I have my thoughts and views on worship music versus Christian music.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if the message is intentional and the message, like you said with Cutlass, is gospel centered, and that's their goal to reach somebody who's not the average churchgoer for Jesus, and they hear these words, and they write these songs about somebody who wanted to I don't know, commit suicide, or they have mental health issues, or they have other issues, anxiety, and they hear a song that's based on one of those topics, they can resonate with that, and they can find Jesus as a result.
Sorry about that. My daughter was underneath my chair and I didn't want her fingers to get pinched. Are you okay, sweetie? I know we're going to go. Kids, I can't hear a word she's saying to me. Lizzie, it's okay. We're going to be leaving a little bit.
Mark for edit.
Yeah. Yeah, but to kind of go back to your point, like you talk about throwbacks, and that's what's Bethel doing. Like I can remember, I think it might have been 2006, but Chris Tomlin had a song called, and I'm not going to say Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone, because
How great is our God?
no, but it was it was Jesus. He did it. He did Jesus paid it all, and it's the same thing. But then he just added a refrain to it, like "Oh, praise the one who paid my debt." Like he did that one. So I mean, and I don't know if the purpose of a throwback, at least at that time in the early 2000s, was to, hey, let's equip churches to kind of hit on some of these older style music that they love, and then kind of add spins. And I mean, I guess in some ways it works, because I know there's some people who they love Amazing Grace, but they definitely are very big at singing Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone. And it's like, cool. But then, I mean, there's other people who, when I play Graves in the Gardens, they're like, oh, I really like that song. And they sing it. And it's like they get it. And it's like, okay. So I think a lot of times when it comes to music, and I think so many times we put our personal preference over what the song is supposed to do, which is supposed to help lead people to Christ. And if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. But at the same, and even if you're like, and I've heard people say, well, this music's a distraction to me be able to worship God. It's like, how can this be a distraction to worship, for you worshiping God, when the whole point of the song is to talk about God and give praise? I don't think it's necessarily the song that's causing disruption. I think it's your heart that's causing disruption, that you're not allowing itself to kind of put your own preference aside and just really say, well, can this song speak to me? Can the Holy Spirit, through the gifts of the musician, through the lyrics of the song, really do inner healing in my life to be able to have that closer connection with God? And I think when we think about it that way, hopefully people will be able to open up. And yeah, if you still like your traditional stuff, that's great, but don't start arguing or knocking and having a poo-poo party on everyone else's parade who are connecting with that type of music to really help them, energize them for the day or for the week. Because again, some people may be listening to Kutless, they may not hear that music in church, but listening to that at the gym is going to kind of not only get them revved up with their workout, but then it's going to help spiritually equip them for them to go through the challenges that they're going to have today.
Yeah. I don't know how much more you want to talk about it, but I just wanted to visit really quickly.
Yeah.
Kind of the deconstruction conversation, because
Yes.
I wasn't involved in the episodes that you did. That was kind of before I joined you on a regular basis, but talking about how Cutlass was compared to senior pastors and kind of held to that same standard and expectation. What are your thoughts on that? And then, like, I think for me, uh, in the last couple of months, I've thought about this, but like, if you think pastors, senior pastors, worship pastors, youth pastors, any kind of pastors don't struggle with sin or have sin issues,
Mm-hmm.
then you're blind and jaded, because it happens. Um, Now, are you having an affair on the altar of the church? No, like that's kind of, but like, you know what I mean? Like those
Yeah,
things are.
I know what you mean.
It's like it's kind of it's a broad thing, but like if you don't think that people don't struggle, you know,
Mm-hmm.
you're just jaded. So what are your thoughts on the deconstructive thing? I didn't really. Again, I wasn't on your series with the deconstruction stuff, but like
Yeah.
how they talk about deconstructing things and separate
It's
themselves from music and the church and all of it. So
well, I mean, I think a lot of times when it comes to deconstruction, what I've learned most from having conversations is it's twofold. The first fold is that what they are, because again, a lot of these people, and again, this is people who are deconstructions, means they've had a faith in Christianity, in religion, in Jesus Christ, before they went through this process. And the two things is that what they're reading in the scriptures does not line up to what they are experiencing within the local church or Christian or the Christian community. And that's the first issue. And then the second issue is that when they address these concerns, it's kind of just, instead of saying, well, here's why we do it, and just kind of having that conversation and going, yeah, yeah, the Bible says this, but we do it this way because this is what we think is works better modernly. And I'm not, I don't have a really good example, or even just having that honest conversation going, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Yeah, we really need to re-examine something and kind of, and I mean, I'll give an example because the church I was attending at, and when I was in Virginia, after I resigned from where I was pastoring, the way they do communion was odd to me because the pastor would preach a sermon and then he'd say something and then he would leave. And then the worship team would get up there and the worship leader would just play some instrumental music. And then all I kept hearing was this rattling noise, and it was people opening up their cups. There was no, this is my body taking remembrance of me. This is my blood taking remembrance of me. And there was no church unison in doing it. So I've had meetings with this pastor monthly. So I brought it up. I said, yeah, like why do you do communion the way you do it? Because I mean, and I kind of mentioned, my whole thing about, being a community. And I think that's, and, and his approach is like, we've struggled with that for years. Because at one point we want it to be everyone do it as a community, but at the same time, some people have a tradition with communion that, they want it to be something personable or something that they can do within their own families with their children there. They can take that moment and do communion as a family. So they want to leave it open and versatile. So that's why there's no traditional, this is my body, this is my blood. I'm like, okay. He explained it, and it was like, it wasn't like, and I think that's okay. But where I've seen from a lot of people is they'll bring it up, and then the pastor's just like, well, yeah, and then they get so offended by someone bringing something up that they double down and they basically turn the script and say, well, this is how we do it. If you don't like it, you can leave. And, you know, you're not a, and you're, or maybe makes insults against the person. And that's kind of what causes the deconstruction. And I think a lot of times, you know, looking at reading the articles of Marty Sampson and even reading some stuff earlier about the lead singer of Hawk Nelson, like a lot of times they got so caught up in the performance aspect of church that they never really got to the nitty gritty of the spiritual aspect or the growth aspect of their spiritual faith. And very easily, I could see, especially in bigger churches, how you could easily well get lost in the system of just doing everything performance based and not really taking that time to have that spiritual formation.
Yeah, it's interesting. It really is. Yeah, but it was cool that he's willing to have that conversation with you. Most people wouldn't.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing that and I think that's key, and I think that's what makes, and I think that's one of the reasons why, you know, some churches can grow the way they can is because they're, you know, either you have a high performance volume and you can do things very well, um, and really have no engagement with the pastor at all, or you can do things where you really have a full engagement with the pastor. And then if you have questions or concerns, you have a church staff that's humble to be able to have those conversations and to be able to do those things. And so I think that's kind of the big, at least for me with deconstruction, I think that's kind of the big crush. And I liked how Kutless said, you know, it was almost like God was telling us to get out of the cave. And I think that made a reference to Elijah, who was doing what the Lord told him to do. He fought against the priest of Baals with that big open challenge where, you know, he drenched his altar and then he prayed to the Lord and God sent fire from heaven. So this great display of God's power that got people to turn from kind of sitting on the sidelines to be great followers of the Lord. And then next you know, Jezebel says, hey, we're going to kill you. And then he runs away and runs into a cave. And he's like praying, and now he's wishing that death would fall upon him. But then, you know, God was able to pull him out of the cave and he was able to find God in a still small voice. And I think a lot of times with Kutless' story is that, you know, when there are those moments, I think it was good for them to have that moment where, hey, here's our mission, we're doing great things for the Lord. But it's challenging because we have Christians who are kind of being nasty to us. We have personal challenges. We have all these challenges. So we need to take a break. We need to kind of help it and sit and heal up and lick our wounds and really say, okay, God, where are you? And when he says, come out in the cave, because I'm now going to pass through, then, you know, that was a moment for them to say, okay, now we're going to go back in the studio. We're going to record. And this time we don't care what we don't care what the church thinks. We don't care what the CCM thinks. If they're going to tell us one thing and we feel like that's against our principles or our missions, or especially against what we believe as Christians, then, you know, forget them. Like, we're going to do it our way, and we're going to do it the way we feel God is leading us to do.
Yeah, and I guess kind of as we we wrap up this conversation, and you need to go take your daughter to do whatever she wants to do, because we've took enough of her time, I think.
Yes, we did.
As we kind of wrap up the conversation, you sent me a list of questions, and I was looking at them. And the last question you have is, what can the church learn from this article? And something that I was thinking of, and not to make this a political conversation, but I was sitting at work a couple of weeks ago, and I was having a conversation with somebody, and they tend, to lean really, really far to the left, and I lean, probably 75-80% conservative, libertarian, the other 20-15-20%. And she's like, this is really nice. And I'm like, well, you know what it is? It's democracy. It's having a conversation. It's being willing to have a conversation with somebody. And I would venture to say that people don't have that conversation and aren't willing to have that conversation. And I think the same to come full circle, to answer your last question. The same goes for the church, right? Like, we need to be willing to have a multi-generational conversation about theology, about worship, about styles of worship, why we're here, why we gather, why we do communion, why we do, it's no different than having, if I'm Church of the Cross down the street and have these are my theological beliefs and why, like this, that's why we have that conversation. That's why we have articles of faith. That's why we have those things in place. So that when people come to church, their first time guests, they know who we are as a church. And so I think it's important to have those conversations. And again, it just blows my mind that 2022 we're still having that conversation about worship and about preference and all those things. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would agree with you too. I'd say, just willing to have the conversation. And I think for church leaders, be humble. And I know it's kind of hard because especially if you have that one parishioner that barges into your office and is giving you a piece of their mind about whatever was done in a service and stuff. It's, when you're vulnerable and you have those moments, that doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel great getting those arrows shot at you. At the same time, I would say if you're willing to have those conversations, and that's the thing that I think the Apostle Paul always says, if you're having that conversation with someone and they're just not listening, and you warn them again, you say, hey, I think this is a concern, and they're just not listening, then have nothing to do with them. You know what I mean? And I think it works both ways. If you're going up to your church leadership, you're saying, hey, I believe that what you're teaching on or what you're preaching on is not in line with the values with scripture or the values of this church, and you bring that warning and the people are just not listening to you or they just don't care, then I think it might be time to make that change. And I think as a church leader too, especially, your time and your inner peace, if you have people who are coming into your office and they just drain you and you're trying to explain to them, well, here's the mission, here's what we're doing, and there's nothing sinful or wrong, but they're just griping at you, then, after a couple times meeting with them and nothing's changing, then just don't entertain them anymore. And I know that sounds harsh, but just don't entertain them because it's just going to continue to suck you dry, and then it's going to cause you to, burn out or cause you to, find unhealthy coping mechanisms and everything else. So there's lots of things that we need to really focus on as far as creating those specific boundaries, but also making sure that when there is that you are having those frank conversations and doing so in a very healthy, spirit-filled way.
Yeah.
Yep.
3 more.
Yep. And that is going to be it for us today, friends. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you've learned something that valuable from listening to this podcast. It seems like we're growing because there was a lot of buzz from our last podcast. Like I kept seeing a lot of stuff. I haven't checked the numbers yet, Mike, because I can't tell you if it's as big as the church communication one, which hit about 4,000 downloads. But we will definitely, definitely us growing is very thanks to just you guys tuning in and listening to us. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Leave us a 5-star review. Share it with a friend. We would love to hear your thoughts on any topic we're talking about. Feel free to go to thescottstedman.com and send me a message or email, and Micah and I will read those letters and discuss some of that stuff. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you have a great Labor Day weekend, and we'll be back on next week with another episode. Take care.